So we come hearing these voices of midwives, of mothers, clanging voices of pain but promise, of injustice and liberation, of brokenness and transformation. They're very powerful stories to sit with today as we celebrate the women, the mothers, and those in this community. And it's important also to be attentive to this image of mother, as we have been thus far in hearing the voices of Katie and Allie, that the image of mother can extend beyond the particularities, and that for some it can bring up exclusion and pain, that not everyone has or is a mother. Many struggle with loss and broken relationships, or have painful experiences around pregnancy and fertility. We attend to and care for all of these experiences of women as a community. And in looking at these texts for today, I cannot help but notice the very varied experience of all these women, of Hagar, and then also Sarah, of Miriam, of these midwives and the women in the Exodus story of the Hebrew people. They're all caught up in these complexities, in the pain associated with bearing children, with the social regulations and sort of social status of the day, with strained relationships and injustice towards women and children in the societies that they lived in. Yet clearly, God is with these women. Their stories and voices ring out and speak of promise and of care. And all of these voices we make room for, the different experiences, like the wind chimes sounding many notes in a sometimes disjointed but exuberant tune. Another voice rings out from much later in history, from England and the church in medieval times, that of Julian of Norwich. She was a nun and an anchoress, as they were called, a kind of isolated asceticism that let her study and pray and be an intellectual and also a life-giving voice in the church in her day. And she picks up this image of mother and sort of explodes it open. There were others who wrote of Jesus and God in this language of mothering before her, but she does it a bit more poignantly and audaciously, claiming Jesus is our true mother. And this was remarkable for the time because the church was ruled by patriarchs and was very much about power and authority, which was underscored oftentimes by a theology that was about the maleness and power of God. So for her to lift up this image of Jesus as a mother was quite profound. And I love how she incorporates this dissonance of gendered terms, that he is our mother, and repeats that, kind of exploding it open beyond gender, but talking about mother as this being and dwelling of God and humanity, that we're enclosed in Christ. That this image goes beyond our boundaries and particularities. It is about being held in this very embodied nature of God's love. We hear another voice in the Mother's Day Proclamation of 1870 given by Julia Ward Howe. I found it very interesting to learn that Mother's Day was actually rooted in the experience of protests for peace amidst the Civil War. It was called Mother's Day because it was mothers who had lost their sons to violence in war that called for this coming together of women to advocate for peace in society. For the next 30 years, it was called a Mother's Day for Peace and celebrated the activism of women, extending from the Civil War and abolition to then improving working conditions and to work for social welfare and to work for public health care and such movements that women were instrumental in seeing through in the 19th century. Her voice from this original Mother's Day proclamation cries, "Disarm, disarm. The sword of murder is not the balance of justice." And her voice rings out amidst all the others. I can't help but hear it echoed by women who have lost sons and daughters and partners to police violence and continue to cry out for justice. Esau Garner, Sabrina Fulton, Leslie McSpaden, Lucia McBath. Their voices are raised today as women who are continuing to call for justice and reconciliation, for transforming the brokenness in our society. Finally, we come to the women of the tomb. We've read their story before, but as we continue to celebrate this season of Easter, we come back to it again. Now, this is an interesting voice to add to the mix because it ends with them running away silent. It's this kind of cliffhanger ending of Mark before other things were added, where Jesus appears later to the other disciples or has a more public ascension into heaven. This original text held just these women as the sole witnesses of Christ's resurrection. That they are the ones, not the 12 disciples chosen around Jesus, but Jesus appears risen to these women who are caught up in this awe and wonder of seeing the life and newness of Christ that is alive and coming from the tomb. And they are amazed, but then they run off terrified, which begs this question: what are we to make of this? Here we're hearing all of these voices of women. They must have said something. But when you think about it, where you're hearing this ending after the gospel story is told. So there's sort of a wondering that, well, they must have said something because the word got out somehow. And there's this spreading of the word of Christ's resurrection and healing power of the God who appeared to these women in the garden. I love also what theologian Mary Ann Tolbert writes about with respect to Mark's ending. She says, well, the gospel writers often wanted to motivate their audience to do something. So it's upsetting to hear and to see these women remain silent. It makes the hearers immediately want to lift their voices, to say, no, but listen, Christ is alive, Christ is transforming. This life eclipses death, it heals brokenness, it creates newness and transforms. It invites this chiming and clamoring of more voices to sound brightly and loudly. It invites all of us to sing of God's liberating power, to celebrate the healing and restoring, to cry out amidst the pain and injustice that we see and experience, and to tell our stories, to lift our own experiences, and to listen to those of others, to bear witness along with all of these remarkable women to God's love